Hello and welcome into Football Fanatic Studios. I'm your host, Vincent, and today we're looking at the Steelers roster. Now, we'll start off by looking at what roster moves they made this past offseason. And you re sign Juju Smith Schuster for his net for another year. In his mid 30s, I'd expect a decline. However, I've been expecting a decline for a couple years, haven't seen it happen, and he's one of these Steelers big bodied receivers that do age well. It's not like he has ever used his speed to separate. So losing another half step, I don't think hurts him all that much. Now, you also re signed Tyson Alualu, a decent, not great, not terrible nose tackle. He does the job. He plays the run at an extremely high level, but he's a nose tackle, so he's not going to make a huge difference into your team. And that's where we go into departures. You lose Bud Dupree, one of the best linebackers you have. You have a couple more good ones, but losing one of your great linebackers will really hurt your team, especially the way this Mike Tomlinson likes to use these guys. Then you lose a starting cornerback in Mike Hilton and didn't really replace him either in the draft or in free agency. You lose Matt Filer and Andrew Villanueva, which you also don't replace really because you draft an interior offensive lineman. And you lose James Conner. He was a starter last year. However, even if they did re sign him, I don't expect him to get that much. And in free agency, he didn't get all that much. So he's not the best running back, and you drafted his replacement and then some. Then you go out and you sign Arthur Mollett and Trey Turner. Just some a little bit of depth there to give you a little bit deeper, but not gonna make a huge impact on your roster. And that is where we go into the draft. And in your first selection, you go and draft Najee Harris, which I rated a 9. And this is because everyone kind of expected it. I'm not saying it was a bad pick. I'm just saying you didn't go out and do anything crazy and overhaul your team with this pick. Now, some people really like to criticize this pick, saying you shouldn't draft a running back in the first round. And most of the time, I'd agree with them, except you didn't have enough draft capital to overhaul your entire offensive line, which is the more important half of your running game. And there is an elite running back there. I can understand the logic, and it makes a certain amount of sense. You're trying to get one last run out of Big Ben before you lose him. So it makes a lot of sense. Also, you get a cheap 5-year rookie deal, so makes a lot of sense. I'm just not certain it pushes them over the edge. You're hoping that he's a combination of the receiving ability of Christian McCaffrey and the running ability of whoever you determine being the best runner, whether that be Saquon Barkley, whether that be Dalvin Cook, whether that be Derrick Henry. Although I don't think he has the power of a Derrick Henry, he's more of a contact balance runner. Then in the second round, you draft Pat Fryermuth, 55th overall, which I graded out as a 9.2. This is a great draft selection, however, I don't see him seeing the field too much in this first year, as it takes tight ends a long time to develop, and he'll just sit. And I think in like 2-3 years, maybe 4, you'll start talking about Pat Fryermuth a bit more, especially when Eric Ebron decides to hang it up or move on. But he'll provide at least some quality depth for the first couple of years. In the third round, you draft Kendrick Green. He might still win out that starting job over the last year's starter. If not, he'll be a great sixth guy to be at your interior offensive line depth. And the way these tackles are going, he might even step outside and play tackle. I don't know. And then in rounds 4 through 7, you got a couple selections there. I think they did a really good job at drafting for the future and not really spending too much, trying to pick some high upside guys and not worry about if they bust out. I don't see any of them really helping out this first year, though. And that brings us to the general overview of the roster. Now, at your receiving ability, like your skill positions except quarterback, you have really good, both depth and just straight up ability. Only thing is, you don't have a great second running back. However, that's not the most important team. It's more important for this team, but if something were to happen to Najee Harris, I think this team could be up there for #1 overall pick next year. But your starting quarterback in Big Ben, he's never been that mobile, losing a bit more mobility as he enters his 39th year here on the planet, not in Pittsburgh. However, if you told me he'd been playing for 39 years, I wouldn't be too shocked. Your offensive line, it has wasn't that great last year. You lose two pieces and don't really do much to replace them, so maybe even a D plus is a bit high there. And that brings us to the bread and butter of a Mike Tomlin defense, their front seven. They have extremely high defensive effort last year. I don't see any reason for that to drop off. Your run defense is an A. The only reason it isn't an A plus is you do have a couple weaker links on the left side, but it still will absolutely destroy the vast majority of run games. Even the good run games, if they're having a little bit of an off day, aren't going to find any room. Your pass rush taking a little step back there, especially with the loss of a Bud Dupree. You can't blitz that middle Mike linebacker quite as often, but you'll be fine on the pass rush. Your fear is defensive depth and secondary. And C and B plus might even be a bit high for your defensive depth and your secondary. You're just going to struggle to cover anyone if that pass rush doesn't get through. If the opposing quarterback gets 3 seconds, I don't expect this coverage to get there, which means Mike Tomlin really will have to scheme up his pass rush to get home every time. And that's just not a recipe that I think will win you too many games, especially in the modern era. So, now taking a look at the starting roster, at least, plus the extra guys, you see that the offensive tackles and second corner are really where your issue is. So, on offense, you got Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, and Eric Ebron as your 5 eligibles for most plays, is what I'd expect. Now, I'd expect even Najee Harris, Claypool, and Juju to really never leave the field, barring injury or fatigue. Because even if you're going like a 5 wideout set, I'd expect Najee Harris to be like your 5th receiver there. Now, Eric Ebron, you may sub out for one of your very deep receiving core. You could put a James Washington or a Ray McCloud out there. Or even a Pat Freiermuth, which I think is a better receiver than Eric Ebron coming in. The reason that I give the nod to Eric Ebron is because he's the better tight end with the blocking ability. And tight end is one of those positions that it takes a little while to come in and learn. So, Deontay Johnson, he's fine. I don't see him getting too many targets just with how deep or how good the top talent is here. Najee Harris will be fine. Schuster will be fine, but Big Ben is really where your issues come in. Now, I have him ranked as a 77 here. That might be a bit high, especially if he doesn't get the offensive line play he's looking for. He's really going to need to consider revamping his game into a bit more mobile quarterback. I know he doesn't have that straight line speed, but he'll need to have amazing pocket presence and just play near perfect to try and help out this offensive line. Speaking of the offensive line, you got Okafor, Dotson, Hessengar, Trey Turner, and Zach Banner. Now, you pick up Trey Turner on free agency with Dotson and Hessengar. I think you're fine. Yeah, also, if one of these guys don't look good, Kendrick Green is your backup, so he'll be like, I think you've got 3 mediocre starters there. Now, your outside guys is where I really find the issue. Because Okafor, it was a late third round pick coming into his 4th year, really hasn't seen the field all that much. I don't expect that much from him, but he's just kind of an unknown at this point. But if he were to come in and stink, it wouldn't really shock me. And Zach Banner, I almost expect to be bad at as a 4th round pick who's played 59 snaps on offense. Coming into his 5th year, I'd expect to see more than 59 if he was something, especially because though they had Villanueva last year, it's not like they had amazing tackle, and he couldn't win out against Villanueva. So unless if he had a huge step up this last offseason, you're gonna really be weak in that right tackle, and that's almost more important for this team than most, just with the lack of mobility from Roethlisberger. So their scheme is a spread and run type scheme. You're going to see a lot of slants, a lot of short to intermediate passage, just mainly because Roethlisberger has never been that great at the deep ball, and especially now that you don't have the ability to pass protect for long periods of time, I don't think you have the time to develop a deep route, to be frankly honest. You're going to see a lot of runs, especially now that you get Najee Harrison. It will really help them out on those third downs because it felt like every third down they ran a slant flat. The opponent knew it was coming and just broke it up, and they were punting again. And let's go on to the defense. For the front 7, you got Devin Bush, Robert Spielwein, Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, Tyson Alualu, Cam Hayward, and Stephon Tuitt. Now, this is an amazing run defense, especially on the right side. I don't expect you to be able to get much, and if you really shift to run left, it wouldn't shock me if you just swap Highsmith and TJ Watt to keep Watt on the strong side of the defense and kind of protect Highsmith on that weak side, hoping they don't run that way as often. You got Devin Bush and Robert Spielwein, both adequate middle linebacker. Spielwein being an adequate guy, Bush being a good middle linebacker. It wouldn't even shock me if he gets the green sticker this year. Your front 3 guys are going to absolutely demolish the run game. Also, Tuitt and Hayward are decent pass rushers, as well as TJ Watt, who has that rising star icon. So I'd expect them to be, at least decent. And that's what this team really builds themselves off of, the front 7 and running the ball. So you get, in the secondary, you get Joe Hayden coming back from last year. He was adequate last year. I'd expect him to actually play even a bit better this year, which we'll get into later. You got Minkah Fitzpatrick coming back from last year. He'll play more than fine at safety as he gets the star icon this year. And Terrell Edmonds, which is an adequate safety. He's not going to make or break your team. If you got 2 safeties like Terrell Edmonds, you'll be fine, especially with the way that Tomlinson likes to use it. Now, your slot cornerback, who I don't have on the field here, and your second corner are really your issue. Because you got Antoine Brooks Jr., you got Arthur Mullet, you got James Pierre, and you got Cameron Sutton. Sutton being the only kind of starter coming back from last year as he's played in slot corner. And that's where I thought he'd play this year. However, the Steelers have him listed as their outside corner. And if they're having him play outside corner every snap, I'd expect him to take a step down just as he learns how to play that outside position at a high level. If he plays in the slot, I'd say bump up that overall like 4, 5, 6 into like the high 70s. But if he has to learn a new position, I think he takes a step back as well. You got Arthur Mullet. He's a decent veteran. You got Antoine Brooks Jr., who last year's secondary wasn't amazing and he couldn't see the field. And you got James Pierre, who same thing as Brooks Jr. They have Brooks Jr. listed as the third guy. Wouldn't shock me if it's James Pierre or Arthur Mullet by the end of preseason. Their scheme is a complex 3-4, and what I mean by that is with Tomlinson, it doesn't shock me if you get looks where you bring like Spieline and Devin Bush in, and then you even do something like move Cam Hayward out to like a more 4-3, and you get a lot of looks, especially with the versatility of Terrell Edmonds to move around in the box a lot. He's one of the ideal strong safeties for this team just because he has the ability to almost step up and play a line like a linebacker. It's just one of those things that I have him listed as like this typical 3-4 defense. However, you'll see a lot of like 5-3 looks. You'll see a lot of like two down linemen, and then like they have like Cam Hayward back. You just get a lot of creative looks from Mike Tomlinson, and that's the main hope for this defense, is that he can keep getting creative and just keep offensive coordinators on their toes and can't find the hole in Cameron Sutton and whoever else becomes the nickel cornerback. And that's why I kind of expect Joe Haden to take a step up, is just because without that second corner, I expect offenses to more just ignore the side of the field that he lines up on. So it wouldn't shock me if Joe Haden isn't a really good player this year, just because they don't throw many balls to him unless his guy's wide open. So I'd expect a very unnotable season from Joe Haden, as the rest of his secondary will struggle. But yeah, the outlook is not that great this year, especially if one of these three front 5-7 guys goes down. You're looking at then having a step down in your pass rush, and it could get really ugly. But I think they stay in most games. You'll get a couple blowouts here and there, but they could do what they did last year and just absolutely stop the run game. The secondary survives, and they are able to sneak into the postseason. That wouldn't completely shock me. However, I find it far more likely for them to be like a 7-10 team, a 6-11 team this next year, as they just struggle to defend any sort of passing game from any team. And in this league, if you're struggling to defend the pass, it's really going to hurt your odds of winning most games. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks, and good